Good afternoon, just testing the audio. Can you guys hear us?
Yes, we can hear. Thank you.
That sounded great. If that like whoever
Hey,
does the Alexa thing ever
Do,
retired.
do that again. I had my audio on, so I created that echo. Try it again. It should be good now.
Test, can you hear okay?
That's better. Sorry about that. Okay. Should we get this meeting started?
I believe 5. Okay.
Jessica, are we good? Okay, let's call this meeting to order. Hello, everyone. Welcome to some beautiful Colorado weather. Hope everyone's had a chance to review the agenda. If I can get a motion to approve the agenda, I would appreciate it.
This is Jason. Move to approve the agenda as presented.
And this is Jason, I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion, a second on the floor. All those that are in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Okay, agenda is approved unanimously. Thank you. Okay, now is a chance for any public comments for anything that is not on the agenda. Easy enough. I hope everyone's had a chance to review the meeting minutes from the March 17th meeting. If I could call a motion to get those meetings approved.
Mr. Chair, this is Gail Sturdivant. I move to approve the minutes as presented.
Do I have a second?
This is Brian. I'll second.
Thank you, Brian. We have a motion and a second to approve the, you want to discuss them?
Yeah, so I showed up late, but I still showed up.
Right. Well, to quote Mel Brooks' High Anxiety, those who are late do not get fruit cup.
Well, I brought my own.
Okay, well then we'll change it and we'll put you on there.
So why don't you, Gail, if you modify your motion.
Yes, I move to amend the motion to add Brandy and Darren as being present during the last TAC meeting. Otherwise, the rest of the minutes should stand as presented.
I'll re-second that.
Can you just put an asterisk by their name though? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving it, the amended motion, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, say nay. All right. Agendas or the meeting minutes are approved. Thank you. All right, John, director's report, please.
Real quickly, because I do want to get to the CDOT report, because we do have a couple of speakers on for that, because we had a request to dive deeper into the GHG stuff. So I'll just hit the highlights, and if I've overcut it, then anybody let me know if they want to go into more detail on something. But for the Board of Directors meeting, the transportation item of note was that CDOT staff and Ppacg staff presented the roadway portion of the 10-year CDOT plan, and that was adopted. And that's basically it for items that you would be concerned with.
Thank you, John. That was a new record. Okay, moving on to,
Can I ask a question?
yes, Brandy.
So transit is still coming back at some point.
That is correct. Transit is still coming back at some point. Jeff, if you want to turn your mic on and if you've got some more information. But my understanding is at the STAC meeting last week, we sort of CDOT staff presented Amber Blake, the new head of Division of Transit Rail, said, hey, this is the way we're going to fund the 10-year plan. This is the way we're going to do it. We're going to take money from the 15% MMOF that is state only anyway, and we're going to backfill it with some FTA funds, as well as finding some coins in the seat cushions of the sofa in the break room. And this is the way we're going to sort of fund it moving forward. STAC was ultimately, yep, okay, that's the way to do it. We're glad it's not coming out of our projects. I think it goes to the Transportation Commission either yesterday or today. And then once that then sets the funding level for the state transit dollars for the state portion. That sort of frees up the question on that, on the local side. So I would suspect we're going to work with Jeff and others at CDOT here in the coming month, and we will and we will bring that back to TAC next month, and then through the committee process, provided you're all okay with that. Was that correct? Close enough to correct, Jeff?
Thank you, John. And sorry, everybody, I'm not there. I have a very ill 8-year-old here with me at home. Yay. And yes, John succinctly summarized it, and that went to Transportation Commission this morning at their regular meeting, but only as an informational item. So no action was made by the TC. I'm hoping, like John said, next month, if any action is to be made to make this final determination. Meanwhile, like John said, we hope to come back to you all next month to re-adopt your already approved plan and have any discussion if there is any.
So does that need to go through the commission before it comes to us, or can it come to us and then go to the commission? What's the order there?
The order is the commission has to sort of take action first, because otherwise, if we go based on the assumption they're going to adopt it, and then CDOT sort of sets all those funding levels, if the commission decides at the last minute they want to do something different, that throws out all our work. So the process will be commission first, CDOT doing some internal sort of workings to make sure the numbers hadn't changed from what we had sort of worked on literally months ago. They'll probably touch base with Brian at NMT to make sure that we have the final list and we're not making any last minute changes. Then it'll come to the TAC. And if the TAC's good with it, TAC and the board. If the TAC's not good with it, they'll make some more changes, and then it'll go TAC, CAC, and the board.
So Jeff, when is the commission gonna meet next to approve that? Will that be before our next TAC meeting?
Probably the same day, right?
Yeah,
the
let me
next-
look at the schedule.
And
yeah.
Rebecca, are you on?
Rebecca
You have your
White.
hand up?
Yeah,
ahead,
I thought
Rebecca.
I thought I might chime in here. Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca White. I head the Division of Transportation Development over here, and we're working hard on the plan. Just to clarify this, this sort of approach and where we landed after STAC and the conversations with TC, I think is really good for transit. We're not planning to take this though as an action item to commission. This is sort of one of a series of head nod items from them. And so the memo and the TC packet was sort of the extent of the further workshopping we'll do with them. So I think you all are in a good place to move forward just based on the fact that we've already had discussions about this and that both the STAC and TC are comfortable. Does that help?
That helps a lot. So
Immensely, thank you.
yeah, so let me revise that then. So at this point, Jeff will review the numbers, get with Brian, and then it could be as early as next month that they bring something back to you guys.
That is our plan, yes. Thank you, Rebecca.
All right, and that would end the Board of Directors report unless anybody else has any other questions.
Okay, thank you, John. Okay, CDOT updates. So I guess we'll hit any other standing agenda items before we get into these specifics.
Yeah, on the CDOT update, I think it was yesterday, received an email from El Paso County saying, hey, on the GHG thing, here's a list of 11 questions and sort of clarifications. And I said, I'll do my best to sort of hit these, but if someone from CDOT's available, let me see if I can get them. So huge thank you to Teresa and Rebecca, who moved things around on short notice to be here today. So the first thing we'd like to do, Mr. Chair, is let them sort of give us an update on what's going on with the GHG. And with that, we'll turn it over to them. And then Rebecca and Teresa, if you're using the list of those 11 questions, great. But if not, I'll try to monitor what you say and when you say it and go back and ask specific questions that you may have missed, if that's okay. And we'll go from there.
That sounds great. Thanks, John. Teresa Takushi, Greenhouse Gas Climate Specialist at CDOT. Appreciate the opportunity to brief you. I'll start a little bit with where we stand with the Transportation Commission and the development of the policy directive, and then we can go into those specific questions. And it does sound like you'd like to go through each of those, John, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's my take on it. But again, I only work here, and it's really what the board, the will of the TAC is. But I think that the questions that were set up by Victoria are shared by many. So if you kind of hit those, I think that's the main points. But then as you answer those, that might bring up some follow-up questions from folks. But I think those are sort of the ones that I think are the most relevant. And again, TAC members, feel free to correct me or do something different.
All right, then. All right, thanks, John. So just to update you all on where we are with the policy directive. So as you all know, and we've talked about previously, you know, the rule was adopted in December, and as a requirement in the rule was to follow with a policy directive. So we are in the midst of workshopping that policy directive. We brought it to STAC. It also has gone to the Transportation Commission for 2 months now. And what we're doing, this policy directive is specific to the greenhouse gas mitigation measures that are that can be used as a compliance mechanism for the rule. They're not required. They are an option for MPOs and CDOT to use in order to achieve compliance. So the policy directive is specific to those greenhouse gas mitigation measures. And just to clarify, these are things that can't be done in our modeling. So we have modeling teams that are meeting every other week to talk about what can be incorporated in the model to show our baseline and our action runs to show compliance with the rule. So those teams are meeting. These greenhouse gas mitigation measures are things that can't be modeled. So they are, right, some of them are even on the cusp. You know, we're trying to figure out what can be modeled and what needs to be separate. So because of that, this policy directive lays out what's required in order to show that you're meeting the reduction levels for these greenhouse gas mitigation measures. And essentially what it is right now is we have the policy directive that lays out the process of establishing measures, how to propose new measures, what the process is to go through that to make sure that the Transportation Commission is adopting something that's been thoroughly vetted. And then there's requirements on what the reporting will look like, both for the mitigation action plan or MAP, and then also the annual reporting that's, again, just required by the rules. So it's all specific to the greenhouse gas mitigation measures. There are also tables. So you'll notice in the PD, the attachments, we have Appendix A, and Table 1 is the actual menu of greenhouse gas mitigation measures. And so as we kind of tie this into the conversation about the comments or the questions that were received, some of these are related to that. So just want to note that some of these are coming from this document that the Transportation Commission is workshopping and plans to workshop again next month. And they intend to adopt in May, at the latest June is what they're thinking at this time. So go ahead.
Well, thanks, Teresa. Just so everybody, we have different folks here who have different experience with modeling and transportation models in general. So I just wanted to clarify when you said, you know, if it can be modeled or not. So just for everybody else's knowledge that aren't super familiar with models, there are a range of models from the super sophisticated that basically creates a artificial person for every person out there and sort of figures out what their day is, right? This sort of thing, to not so sophisticated models. Again, it usually is a variable of how sophisticated or how much money the MPO has to sort of purchase the model. So that's one thing. And then there's the other sort of the can it be modeled? Again, depending on the sophistication, you can say, well, we're going to make an adjustment to this number to adjust for something that's out there in real life, right? So there's a difference between something that everything can be modeled because it's all based on assumptions. But I think to put a finer point on what Teresa's saying, and Teresa, don't let me put words in your mouth, is there are certain things that can't be modeled because of the documentation that's necessary for the sophistication of the model, so to justify that sort of number. So in a world where you're doing like federal modeling and you don't have sort of those same sort of things, and you just have to document your process, I could say, well, I've got 3% of folks that are going to walk, and if I do this, I'm going to take this 3% off this other number, and that's how I'm going to sort of model it. Versus this more sophisticated sort of idea that CDOT saying, well, if you're going to do 3%, you got to prove it based on these numbers and how that all sort of works and what the likelihood of that is. So again, just so everyone's clear, everything can be modeled. So when we're saying things that can't be modeled in this context, it's things given the sophistication of the model in conjunction with the documentation necessary really shouldn't be modeled, and therefore these mitigation measures are more appropriate. So hopefully that helped everybody, and hopefully, Teresa, I didn't say something that you disagree with.
I guess I would just add, John, appreciate the further explanation. So when I'm talking about modeling, I'm talking about using either the statewide travel model or MPO models specifically. And again, as John said, it's really capturing the travel choices that people are making in their models. So to John's point, sometimes some of these measures, you might be able to put some of the parameters in the model, but you might not show the effect on greenhouse gas emissions, or the model, like you said, John, is not quite sophisticated enough yet. So there's a lot of progress in this area. Modelers are working really hard all the time to make the models better. So a lot of these measures, yeah, they're just not showing, they might not be showing the impact yet, or maybe in some cases we just don't have the capability yet to model them. So that, yeah, hopefully that's helpful. So again, that's the modeling. Some of these other ways that we're calculating emissions, we're just trying to better capture the good work that's being done and what the emissions reductions would look like. So thank you for that clarification. With that, should I just kind of get right into some of the answers to the questions that were laid out?
I think so. That would be awesome, unless anyone from the TAC has a question or wants to take a different tack. Get a tack. Never mind.
All right, then. Okay, so let me just kind of line, but I'll just read off the questions so that you can understand the context of each of these. So the first question is, I'd like to make sure that the region understands some of these key points and issues, such as one is the definition of urban, suburban, and rural based on population density where a mitigation is proposed. So this question is coming from, again, if you look at the draft policy directive and you look at table 1, which is on page 11, you'll notice that we have a footnote in here. So table 1, we start off with bike ped measures, and we're footnoting what we mean when we say a bike lane or bike facility in an urban area, a suburban area, or a rural area. So if you look at footnote 3, you'll see that urban corresponds to a census tract or block group population density of greater than 4,000 persons per square mile. Suburban to density between 500 and 4,000 persons per square mile, and rural to density of less than 500 persons per square mile. So that footnote explains kind of where those numbers are coming from. And I just want to note that the reason why we chose these numbers is because this is what the reference, the science in the research, it shows that these are the type of reductions that you would estimate for these type of population levels. So this is taken strictly from the research that these numbers in table 1 were drawn from. So that's where those definition pieces came from. The next question is the fact that sharrows or multi-use or paved shoulders don't count as mitigation, even though FHWA approves of their use for bike ped. So if you, again, take a look at table 1, you'll notice that we have a bike lane or facility, and that's, again, further defined in the footnote. And we also give additional points for protected lanes, separated lanes. So again, we're looking at what is having people make the choice to take a bike rather than to drive. So again, this is based on it's based on research that shows that sharrows are not as effective as a bike boulevard, and therefore it doesn't.
Teresa?
Therefore, I'm sorry. Yes.
I'm sorry. This is Tim. I can't see what are you sharing something on your screen, or am I missing something?
I am not. I am just looking. No, I'm just looking at my notes to make sure I hit all the points. would you like a link to the PD so you can see what I'm referring to?
I think John's doing that right now.
Okay, great. Thanks, John. So on this topic, again, this is a draft PD, and so we would welcome if there's additional data or research that shows that there's a benefit. We again are drawing from proven research. We're looking at best practices here in this PD. So that's again, while you'll notice there's citations on each of these measures, we're trying to make sure that this is state of the science. So just to note that for Sharrows. Okay, again, the next piece is the fact that road bike lanes only count as mitigation if they are striped, signed, and traffic calming is provided for on low volume roads. Again, to answer this question, this is it's grounded in literature and studies that people use such facilities. So this goes to the motivations for people to, again, take a different mode of transit. And so safety, time, money, all of these factors incorporate into why someone decides to take a bike versus drive or another mode. So again, just based on the science and the literature that were reviewed. Okay, the next question is that the mitigation numbers and how small they are and how they could go down over time compared to the large number of reductions our region needs to make. So a couple of notes that I want to note here is mitigations are really not intended to be the only mechanism for compliance with this rule. In fact, it's unlikely to achieve compliance through mitigations alone. Again, the greenhouse gas rule is a planning rule, so planning is the primary mechanism for compliance. These greenhouse gas mitigation measures that are outlined in this PD are an additional step that's voluntary, and again, it's not required, but it's one option for meeting your compliance. The other piece of this is the numbers do go down over time. So again, if you look at that table, you'll note that a bike lane if you laid a bike lane down now, it would have 10 tons of greenhouse gas emissions benefit now, or in your 2025 compliance year, but that same mile of bike lane is only going to have 2 tons of greenhouse gas benefit in 2050. The reason for that is, yes, the mile is the same, but the emissions that you're offsetting from that bike lane, when you look at 2050, we have so much cleaner cars on the road that the emissions go down significantly. So you'll see that reflected. I'll note here that this is exactly the way we approach the rule itself. So when you look at the greenhouse gas planning rule, you'll notice that the emissions reductions in the rule, our requirement actually decreases over time. So the amount that we need to comply with in 2030 is a greater amount because there's more pollution from vehicles on the road than in 2050. The number that the reduction level is actually a smaller amount. So again, we're being very consistent with the way we apply the rule.
Okay, I have a question just to make sure that I'm following even remotely. You mentioned that mitigation is only going to be a portion of this and that you're really hoping that planning kind of, checks the box. How do you plan, or how do you plug in the planning into the model so that we can use that to our advantage to meet the requirements?
This is when I wish that we had a more technical. I wish Eric Sabina was on the line, but let me try to attempt to answer that. So when you look at, again, when we look at the rule, it says you need to model at a minimum your regionally significant projects. So when you model these, you're looking at how your projects impact how people travel on the road, but you're also looking at many other factors. You're looking at land use patterns and things like that. So when you model your plan, you're modeling your baseline, your current system, and then you're modeling, okay, well, and what will the new plan, how will it affect emissions? So hopefully that helps answer. The one thing I just want to note is when you put those elements into your either MPO model or again, a statewide travel model, you have all these synergies that happen because you're showing the choices that people make. You're looking at specific areas and how people are traveling within those areas. So it definitely shows a lot more than, again, a simple a table that's just trying to only attempt to quantify the greenhouse gas emissions. So hopefully that's helpful. Did you,
So,
Rebecca, want to add?
Oh, okay. Do you want to go ahead, Rebecca? But I can put a finer point on that. But go ahead.
I was just going to add, this, well, a few points. the history of using these sophisticated models to figure out what's going on with transportation and air quality has been around for a long time. This is how, when we're out of attainment with the national EPA air quality standards, this is the work that Dr. Cog and North Point Range is doing now to figure out the ozone levels. So really what Teresa is saying, you put all your future transportation projects within your regional transportation plan into this model, and it predicts how much people will drive across that system over the long term. From that, we get a total of vehicle miles traveled, and then we convert that into carbon dioxide emissions. So it's a several step process. It is complex, but not unprecedented. In fact, like I said, this is the same mechanism we use to look at other pollutants.
And
John,
if
I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, just to put a finer point on it, I think this is sort of your question, Brandy, is as we go through the planning process, right? You guys, we sort of say, here's our regional issues. These are the places we think we're going to have congestion right now and where we think it will be projected in the future. Then we give you sort of, this is the amount of money that we have, and you guys all come up with a preferred project list. We then take that preferred project list and we model it. In the past, the last time we did this, we were as a maintenance area for conformity, right? All we had to do is sort of run the model and show that that we weren't making it worse, and that was all we had to do. We were in maintenance for 20 years. We're now, knock wood, out of maintenance, and our next plan will be in attainment moving forward. So when she's saying that you have to sort of find planning solutions, what we'll do in the future is we will look at you guys will make your preferred project list. Will model it. He'll come back and say, after we've modeled all these projects, of the 2.12 or whatever it is million metric tons of GHG we need to reduce, we're only reducing X, so we're this much short. So the planning part of compliance is then you all would go back and look at the list and remove projects out of the list and replace them with other projects that do not create more greenhouse gas than the project you removed. And then we would remodel it. And in a perfect world, if we came to GHG compliance, we would be good. Or if you guys got to a point where, look, there's no more projects we can remove. We can't take out any more capacity projects, so we can't put in any more non-GHG capacity producing projects, and we run the model and we're still out of compliance, that's when we move into the mitigation measures. Teresa made a point that it's not intended that you can reach compliance through the mitigation. We'll ran the numbers, and this is just the back of an envelope, but basically we would need 18,000 miles of sidewalk to get into compliance, and the earth is what, 2,400 miles. So we basically have to go 3/4 or around the world in sidewalks, and we still wouldn't, and that's what we would need to have compliance. So the compliance, the mitigation measures aren't really going to get us there. It has to be part of this project mix and how you select projects. Or ultimately, if this all can't work, then the other sort of option is we just say we can't comply. We take the 10 or 12 million dollars that we have in federal dollars here, we put them all towards transit, bike, and ped, and then any sort of real capacity projects you'd have to do through the PPRTA. And I know Brian's going, yes, more transit. So that's sort of how you do it on the planning side, is you're just swapping out those projects and remodeling in an iterative process to find what your GHG numbers are.
And I'm assuming you guys haven't done any of this modeling. We just have the back of the envelope. So if we get to the point where we can't mitigate our way out of this, then when do we do a reality check? Because I do not want to spend 10 to 12 million dollars on those and then just have our roads fall apart and we've just dug ourselves a bigger hole than we can ever get out of.
Right. I think the first thing is we wait to see what the mitigation final rule is, but then again, the way the SB 260 was written was CDOT, Ppacg, and North Front Range all have to comply with the rule first. They have to come up with something as soon as this October, right? So we sort of get a free look on how it all works out with these sorts of things. So if they either can't do it and there's pushback on that, then we watch to see how it happens. If B, they manage to figure out how to do it and still have a lot of capacity projects or a reasonable amount of capacity projects, then we'll see how they did it and we will copy that formula. So to some extent, we're just trying to provide input as to how we think the process would work or could work, at the same time, understanding that we're going to have other folks come before us that we can watch to see how they go through the process. Gail?
So John, and I know you said that Ppacg and North Front Range are going to do that. Do we, while they're doing that, do we have to start doing our model and establishing the baseline in there? And so what's going to be the assumptions going in the baseline? Just with what we're showing in the tip, is it things in the long range plan? Because we have a lot of non-federally funded projects that, depending on how you define regionally significant, may or may not need to be included in that.
Right. So Will, if you could grab a microphone or come on up, but I'll start. So and again, Teresa and Rebecca, I appreciate you sort of hanging on with us. I know we're a little over time, but I think this is an important discussion, and we've gone a little afield of having you good on the list. So I appreciate you sticking with us. But yeah, as far as the model is concerned, we model basically everything. It's just a matter of this regionally significant definition or not. But even if it's not regionally significant, if it's still causing these things, it still gets sort of captured in the model. It's just whether or not if it's within the node or if it's traveling along the link between nodes. But I'll let the expert put a much better answer than that.
So the baseline has already been calculated, and it was derived from the 2045 adopted project list from the long range transportation plan. That is what was turned over to CDOT. That was used by the CDOT modeler to put through another program that models GHG production, along with certain assumptions that were considered to develop that baseline. Those assumptions took our network that was in the adopted plan and all the projects that were in the adopted plan, and then assumed a certain amount of EV penetration going out to 2050, as well as a certain increase in transit ridership going out to 2050, and use that to calculate what our baseline GHG numbers were going to be. And then from those baseline numbers came up with what we need to further reduce using ideally a project mix, and if necessary, mitigation measures going forward in the next long range transportation plans that we submit.
Can you remind me, does the 2045 list of projects include PPRTA2 B list projects?
It did not include the B list projects, no.
Okay.
Okay, are we good? So we'll go back to the list. I forget which one you were on, but Teresa, sorry about that.
Nope. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, and I guess one thing I'll just note is, again, it's looking at the whole project mix. So when John was kind of talking about looking, it's not, just to clarify, it's not necessarily pulling projects. It's just looking at the different types of projects that you have in your plan. So just wanted to clarify that one piece. I think the next question we're on is the fact that we don't get credit for fleet or vehicle electrification or charging. So I just want to note, this is a great question. We're actually getting a lot of input in this area. So this is an area of continued discussion. You'll note that in the draft PD, we don't have a section on electrification. We did discuss this at the TC workshop yesterday, and this is, as I mentioned, an area of continued discussion. So what we're trying to do is not double count emissions from this sector. This rule itself and the greenhouse gas reduction levels are really pulling out the vehicles from planning. So we were intentional about how we crafted that. Now, for the mitigations, we want to think about how we could incentivize electric vehicle charging, medium heavy duty fleet, things like that. However, there's a lot of effort in this space statewide. So we're trying to make sure that we're not double counting those emissions. And that is definitely an area that we're digging into, and we hope to have more information in the coming weeks on that. The next point is the long process and data needed to add new mitigation measures. So we have heard this as well from other stakeholders. This is actually at the request of the commission that we have a process outlined in the policy directive on how new mitigation measures come forward. So we really want to make sure that when the Transportation Commission is considering new measures, that they have the opportunity to really understand that a lot of subject matter experts have looked at this information, agree that it's the best information available, and feel comfortable amending their policy directive with an updated table. So because the Transportation Commission wanted all of these measures in a policy directive, any update to that has to go through them for approval. So again, you will notice that there is a process laid out for how that's done. Essentially, MPO, a member of the public, anyone can bring a measure forward. It has to go through our interagency consultation team, which is built of all of the MPOs, local government, well, I'm trying to think, there's the 2 local government reps, and then all of the different agencies that are involved. So we have 2 sister agencies that are also on that IACT. From there, once the measure is recommended, it can go forward to the Air Pollution Control Division for their review period. And so as outlined in the rule, they have an opportunity to look at those measures, make sure that the numbers that are used to calculate all of these measures are sufficient. That is actually the process we're working towards to develop this initial list. And that is the process that the commission requested, that we continue to have that type of rigor as we bring new measures forward. Okay, the next question is about TDM mitigation is based solely on the amount of money spent and doesn't account for programs / policies to count reduced trips. I just wanted to note here, so if there is a recommendation that we explore different metrics for TDM, we would be open to that. Again, this is in draft form, we're welcoming feedback, we're welcoming research and better numbers. And so we're in that phase right now where if there's a request to have us look at this in a different way, we are open to looking at it that way. Okay, the additional NEPA work for greenhouse gas needed, and that they don't have procedures / process / guidelines for doing it. So on this note, I just want to note that we are planning to issue interim guidance for NEPA greenhouse gas specifically. And this is in response to our Senate Bill 260 requirements. So in Senate Bill 260, it asks CDOT to consider greenhouse gases in NEPA reviews at the same analytical rigor of other pollutants. So we are working on our interim guidance on that. And it's true, we haven't yet issued that, but we are planning to as soon as we can. And then the last question is, do they have an assessment or any understanding of whether the 10-year plan for our region will be impacted? Do you want to, Rebecca will take this one.
Yeah, this is an interesting question because just to clarify, the way the rule is structured is there's essentially 5 agencies that are impacted. 6, the 5 MPOs and CDOT. For CDOT, our obligation in terms of our 10-year plan is all the rest of the state that's outside of the MPO areas. So we pick up, remote parts of Southwest Colorado and Southeast Colorado. Everything outside of an MPO is our obligation. And then every individual MPO has their own standard. And as John mentioned earlier, Ppacg has extra time along with Grand Valley and Pueblo to do this work. And so you guys are a few years out. We do have to show a compliant plan for the whole state for our non-MPO area by October of 2022. We're just now in the midst of doing that modeling and running the baseline. We haven't, as you all were talking about earlier, we haven't finalized all the projects in our updated plan. So we'll be getting more information in the coming weeks and months with the goal, obviously, of meeting that October deadline to have a compliant, updated transportation plan in place for the state. Whew, that was a lot of questions. It'd be good to pause here, and I don't know if Victoria's in the room to see if we caught everything, if we've caused any confusion, because this is pretty complicated stuff. It's hard to just, it's sort of like walking into a conversation midway through and trying to figure out, if you don't kind of do this every day, it's difficult. So want to make sure we pause and see if we've created more questions, or if Victoria wanted to touch on anything else.
Hi, Rebecca and Teresa. Thank you so much for being here. As you guys have dealt with me before in the past, and you know that I'm tracking this stuff and trying to figure it out and trying to figure out how to make it work. I also recognize that not everybody in the region has an environmental background and can follow this stuff. So I really wanted to just ask some of these questions, and I thank you so much for coming in and sharing this with everybody so that we have a broader understanding of the region. And even though I have an environmental background, a lot of this stuff is really heady and just very confusing and hard to understand. And so we're really grappling with, you know, we road people, we build roads, you know, how do we then incorporate this whole other thing into our road building and trying to figure out how we serve our citizens best. So with that, I just want to also understand, so if I'm really concerned that our region is not going to meet our greenhouse gas reductions. I'm just worried about that based on mostly the fact that we are growing really fast and we're going to be building new roads, and we have capacity issues already. We know we have widenings. We're planning for them with our PPRTA projects for the next 10-year cycle. So in doing that, you know, we're struggling with that issue of, we have capacity needs, we have to build them. We think we're going to have to build them for PPRTA, but it still sort of counts against us in this modeling effort. So if it all comes down to the fact that we can't meet our regional reduction, then I just want the region to understand. So then basically all of our federal money has to get spent on multimodal transit. But my question is, do we also get to spend federal funds on safety, resurfacing, roundabouts, turn lanes? Can we do that also, or does the money all have to go to just those mitigations?
I'm so glad you're asking these questions, Victoria. So a few things there. When we set this standard and the commission adopted it, the reduction levels that were selected were seen as aggressive but feasible. So yes, it does require work, and CDOT is right there with you. We're going through this process now and thinking, okay, how are we going to get there? So understand that point. I think where you're sort of going next is where, you know, I would be if I was you too. What if we can't get there? And I just want to make it very clear that the compliance that comes in if Ppacg can't reach these targets is that only 2 federal funding sources have a restriction if you guys can't get there. One is CMAQ, which Ppacg doesn't get unless you go into ozone non-compliance, which I hope you don't, but the other source is Surface Transportation Block Grant dollars, so STBG. Last I looked at the numbers, I think I don't know, John, correct me, it was like $9 million or something. I know that that's real money, but in the context of your overall plan, it is a very small amount. It doesn't affect your PPRTA projects. So all the outcome, I guess, for you all would be for those STBG dollars, we would need to see them spent on projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That's the compliance measure. So it's there. It's meant to try to encourage everyone to get there, but I think it's a pretty fair outcome, recognizing that we're all going to have to work pretty hard to meet this standard. So I just want to make that clear. That any other federal funding sources don't come into this, safety dollars, all of that. We're really, for you all, it would only be those STBG dollars.
And so they have to be spent on projects that reduce greenhouse gases. So a resurfacing project or resurfacing and adding shoulders, that does not reduce. It's just a zero sum.
Exactly.
So we would not be able to use our SDP dollars for those types of maintenance projects.
One more caveat, we've we've in sort of anticipating this situation, and in our minds, we were thinking of what if there's a really critical safety project? What if that's the project that couldn't show it reduces greenhouse gas emissions, really needed to go forward? That's why we wrote in this sort of waiver process where PPACG would go to the Transportation Commission and say, I'll use your example. We've really got to get out here and resurface this project. It's got, $500,000 of STBG in it. It doesn't impact greenhouse gas emissions. It doesn't make anything worse. We're just improving our asset. We would like a waiver. And I would tell you, I think that would be, the commission would be very receptive to those sorts of circumstances. So we've tried to think through all of those outcomes. These are great questions. Yeah.
No, thank you. And I'll leave it open to other people to ask questions too.
And Victoria, just the door's open. Really, these questions were phenomenal from you, and keep them coming. And if you want a standalone meeting, we're spending a lot of time on this, and every input we get just makes us better. So I appreciate your time and thought in it.
If there's no other questions, can I go back to the one about the assessment of the 10-year plan? I just want to put a finer point on that if I can. And again, remember exactly what Rebecca said, that if the project lies within the MPO, that even though it's a CDOT project, it's part of our model and would be part of our GHG process. It is conceivable, especially because, again, as I think Victoria had said, with our PPRTA projects already sort of taking the capacity bandwidth, if we're able to do capacity projects, it may very well come down to a regional decision on whether or not you do a project within one of the jurisdictions that's not PPRTA or a CDOT project. So it could have an impact. We just have to, again, sort of wait and see on how it all works out before we can determine that. But again, we're in that lucky position where we get to sort of see how it happens around the rest of the state before it impacts us. But in my mind, if I understand everything correctly, we all know that's not a given, that is certainly a consideration that we might have, that sort of decision-making process that we'll have to decide one over the other sort of thing. Because while she's talking about that $9 million of STBGP, there is another pot of money, which is that CDOT pot of money that comes into Region 2 that is spent within the MPO boundary. And that is considerably more, and that would also be restricted. So when we talk about the 9 million, that's on the one side, but there is another pot of money that she didn't quite hit, which is CDOT projects that could no longer be done and would have to be moved over to other types of projects. So
Can I ask, what if you were to receive a federal discretionary grant? Let's say a RAISE grant or Chrissy, how would that be impacted?
well, if it's regionally significant, we have to model it.
Yep.
But I don't believe you have to give back the grant. But have you guys sort of figured that one out yet? Or is that, or is that a new one to add to the list?
That's a new one to add to the list. I don't think we'd ever want to put ourselves in a position of turning away federal dollars. So let me look at kind of the various scenarios we've worked out and provide a better response to that. But I don't think we would put ourselves in that position. So
okay.
Let me take a pass on that one, John, and get you a more thoughtful answer.
And then I think the only other thing that I heard that I want to make sure that we cover real quickly is that, and this is mostly for El Paso County, because while they have they're part of the donut hole that is the MPO, we still have good portions of El Paso County that are in TPR 14 Central Front Range. So those projects and anything outside of that is all going to fall within that bigger statewide 10 TPRs coming up with that state reduction. So again, you'll have these areas that are technically in these rural TPRs, but close enough to urbanized areas that you still might have some things that need to happen. Again, given that CDOT has a 10-year list, and again, this is intended to sort of make you guys understand the pain CDOT has to feel. So I know you guys don't get a lot of sympathy all the time, but here's an attempt at some sympathy, right? They've got a list of these 10-year plan projects, and from those 10-year plan projects, they need to show a reduction. Remember, this is not a budget, so they can't just say, we're going to do these projects and we're going to hit there. They have these existing projects, and then they need to reduce from that level literally all around the state. So if they can do it, great, but I suspect at the end of the day, they're going to have a lot of issues, especially since they don't have a lot of the mitigation. They can't do a travel reduction program. They can't do land use, right? As the state agency, a lot of these mitigation measures are not open to CDOT. So they're going to have these projects in these 10 TPRs that they're going to have to somehow show a reduction of. And it's not even like they have 30 years worth of projects that they can sort of say, well, we're going to not do this one or this one. They have a very small pool of projects to show the reduction, because again, the way it's written is with a reduction, not a budget or something else. So that's the other thing that could impact the 10-year plan within this region, but not necessarily in the MPO. And I think we have a question from Gail, but before we move on, Rebecca, Teresa, did you take that as sympathy, or did I misspeak and I made it more difficult?
I'll take it as sympathy. Thank you, John.
Could you revisit or explain to us how growth within our region was taken into consideration, either from the baseline or modeling or projected future reductions? Because as you're aware, we're experiencing significant growth in our region that I think somebody else already mentioned.
Do you want me to take a first stab, or do you want to do it?
I'd love your first stab, John. And I don't know if Will's there, but yeah,
Well,
please.
well, let me give the first stab only because I just want to make sure that I understand it. So if they correct me, then we know I got it wrong. So this was actually one of the big things that was part of this discussion literally about a year ago, because we've been living through this for about 2 years. And so I think at that time, CDOT saw what we were saying about sort of how we do this. So the response or the solution is that it's no longer sort of predicated on a GHG number, but rather your baseline projects within your model. So if you update your model and you get a more sophisticated model, or you update your model for population and everything else, it's now all based on these baseline projects. So whether it's the old model or a brand new model, you take your baseline projects, you run it through that model. And again, if it's a newer model that's been updated for population, you get a number. You change your project mix, you run it through the same model, whether it's the updated model or that older model. And then the difference between the two is your GHG, either reduction or addition based on that. But that was the way it was intended to address the population growth and better data and more sophisticated things. So before you give a follow-up, did I actually get that right, guys?
Yeah, I will try a finer point, John. I think what you were saying, and let me just put it in the words that I tend to use, because I'm not a modeler either. Both your baseline run and your second run factor in population growth. And so that's factored in both model runs. And we use the state demographer numbers that they give us on what each area is expected to grow. So that's not, it's not a penalty because both models consider it. Did that help, John? All right.
Well, I think you
Gail?
helped me verify my understanding of what John said. And I think maybe some of this is the misunderstanding of the semantics of baseline. There's only one baseline. When you redo the model, you're doing a re-baseline establishment, right? And that's the process that has been very unclear, honestly, until actually the way it's been explained today. I'm still nervous about that, about the whole modeling process in and of itself, but at least that explains that we can re-baseline based on our given current situation.
Yeah, I mean, some people are more optimistic about this than others, But to quote The Fly, be afraid, be very afraid.
I wish I had a counter quote.
So are we, I take it by the silence. I think we're done and we can hand it back over to you, Mr. Chair. I do want to stress again, thank you both for clearing your schedules and doing this very last minute for us. I think we could see that if I tried to handle this conversation by myself, it would not have been nearly as informative and we wouldn't have gotten the great answers. And I will say this because I've said it before and I want to take the time to say it in a public setting as often as I can. No matter how you feel about this, but if you are one that sees this as a very negative thing and a thing that is working counter to some of the different goals, just remember CDOT is not the villain of the story. This is all things that were set in motion by the legislature. The legislature put in the deadlines, they put in all the parameters that have locked CDOT in, and why it would be nice if they had some flexibility on some things. They really don't. And they've done a yeoman's job of doing what they can based on the parameters that they've been given. And again, no matter how this all works out, if it ends up being a great thing or not so good thing, if it's a great thing, it's because CDOT made the best of a very bad situation. And if it's not, again, it's not on CDOT, it's on the legislature. So I know you guys can't respond to that. I don't expect you to, but that's one thing I just want to make sure everybody understands. This is not a CDOT driven thing. It's more of a CDOT response to a situation they were put in. So thanks.
Thank you, everyone. All right, how about we move on to our Ppacg allocation status item? I saw a page on there. Eric?
Yeah, Paige, do you want me to sort of introduce you and then you'll sort of jump in? Are you there still?
Yeah, we're still here.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, how's it going?
So real quickly, as some of you know, the way the sort of the federal funding works is you get funding and you're expected to obligate it in the year that it's programmed, but sometimes that's not possible. And so CDOT has done a great job of spending our current year money and then backfilling it with future money. That's an oversimplification. But again, they've done a great job of making sure we don't lose any money, and they've always been spending the oldest money first. That being said, we do have a little bit of a glut that is out there on state funds. And given that sometimes when new bills come into place, they fund the new bills by sweeping the money out of the old bills. We want to make sure that we're in a position where Ppacg doesn't lose any of its funds specifically, and to the extent we can help the state make sure that none of the state funds are ever lost, we want to do that as well. So Eric and Paige have done a sort of a nice PowerPoint sort of putting together some of the issues based on the obligations, and they're going to sort of chat through it today. So again, they're here as part of the solution to making sure we sort of spend down that glut and get in a pattern of obligating money and spending it in the same year and really being a lot more efficient with our obligations. So with that, Paige, are you going to kick it off or Eric?
Yes, I will kick it off. Eric's computer just crashed, so he's going to come back on here in a minute. John, is it possible for me to share my screen so I can show this PowerPoint?
It is. So Eric's screen is frozen. I thought he was just staring me down like I said something wrong, but okay, that makes a lot more sense.
He is crashed. It says that participant screen sharing is disabled right now.
Try again.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Let's see. Yes. All right. And I think you see a PowerPoint status of Ppacg's allocation.
Yes.
Okay.
And it says April of 2022.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Right,
Good.
it's
Good.
got
Good.
the CEDO logo. No.
Yeah. right, well, hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing us to have time to come on here today and talk to you about the status of your funds. My name is Paige Castaneda, and I work in CDOT. We are, Eric is my boss, and we're on a small team where we send all of the projects to the feds for reimbursement. We do a lot of project management upfront to kind of help them with the finances. We oversee programs and ensure that they're spending, getting things in the STIP, making the tips and the STIP match. So we do a lot with the MPOs and project management and project sense. We're going to come and talk to you today about the status of your TAP, your Transportation Alternatives Program, and your STBG Urban Funds. So where we're coming from and what we kind of analyze is we want to make sure that your roll forwards are minimized, that projects are getting budgeted, and then pool balances are being drawn down. And ultimately, all of that is to avoid any lapse, right? If there is lapse that's going to set up, that's funds that will go away, that FHWA will not reimburse, and those funds are lost and gone forever. And like John said, we're pretty good at seeing as projects come in and start spending money, and we'll make sure that the oldest money is spent first. But it's important that we communicate to you guys when, we can't always do that as much, or if we like, hey, we need some more projects to come online in order to be spent. So that leads us into first, where we're going to look at is the Transportation Alternatives Program. So, oh, go ahead, Eric.
I am here, so
Yay!
I can jump in also.
Okay, go ahead and take this one.
And I'll just thank everybody again for letting us join, and thanks for introducing us, Paige. All right, so for the TAP program, we want to just point out that about $2.5 million of federal funding is set to lapse September of 2024. So you have a little over 2 years to obligate that amount of funding. And then in 2025, an additional 1.2 million is set to lapse. So that 1.2 million is essentially this year's allocation would lapse in 4 years. So the funding that's set to lapse in 2024 is a culmination of the multiple previous years prior to this year. So although that's several, a couple of years away, we do want to point it out because as the data that we'll show you in a minute displays, it does take several years to get projects active and obligating, and that there has been an accumulation or backlog of those dollars. So we are looking for help in expediting these projects or ensuring that those projects don't fall any further behind. And I'll just point out that the new IIJA actually establishes a higher allocation of TAP funding for MPOs, both just in a general increase across the board for the IIJA. Many or most of the funding categories grew in general, but TAP specifically now has a larger portion dedicated to population-based programs. Obviously urban areas and MPOs. All right, thanks, Paige.
Thanks. So you'll hear us talking a lot about obligations. And I think all of you know what those are, but if you don't, obligation is the formal commitment from FHWA to reimburse a project. We don't obligate funds on a project until we see expenditures, because then we know that the project is going through. If we obligate funds on a project that isn't expending, we run the risk of making that project inactive, which makes makes the feds very unhappy. So we try not to do that. So we only look for expenditures. And then once you obligate those funds, then those funds are no longer at risk of lapse. So I'm not talking about expenditures today, but I'll be talking about obligations. In this graph here, you can see your TAP allocation is the blue box here, consistently around 500,000, a little bit over every year, depending on, and then the green is the roll forward. So this is previous project balances this is kind of your pool balance, right? That hasn't been budgeted into a project yet and is rolling forward into each year. And it's pretty high consistently for the TAP program. It's about 624% on average of your allocation amount. However, in 2022, you'll notice coming into this year that we noticed a significant
Excuse me.
decrease. Yes,
Can we
absolutely.
ask for a point of clarification? And I understand the
Yes.
difference between the obligation and the allocation, but then you started saying budgeted, and that means something completely different to us in
Okay.
municipal funds. So would have, once we get the award, we budget that money and look at it in a capital improvements program that, let's say we're talking about a 5-year plan. But I understand it's not actually obligated till we put a contract in place. Really, you're doing it between CDOT and the feds on our behalf, and we're doing it with you with CDOT and the local governments through an IGA. For us, that's really when the obligation comes into place for those funds. Is that what you're saying is budgeted? Because those are
But-
two different things for us.
Yeah, budgeted for us, or go ahead, Eric, you can talk.
Yep. Thanks. I'll answer this one. Yeah. So from our perspective, budgeted means the funds are actually set aside within our SAP accounting system. The funds are set aside so that a contract can be executed between us and the local agency. So it's slightly after the IGA has been completed. Do we budget the project?
It's still technically official from a federal standpoint. It's really when those funds are obligated.
Right. So CDOT, Colorado, we use what's called advanced construction to get federal projects authorized. And that allows us to authorize conceivably more projects than we actually have federal funding available at any given time. And then we use the technical obligation of federal funds more as a cash flow tool. And so when we're talking about obligations, we do largely talk about, is the project budgeted and spending money? So ideally, when we talk about increasing actual federal obligations, we mean increasing the spending of those projects. So that obviously means getting those projects authorized by the feds, and getting IGAs completed, all those steps between we awarded, the MPO awarded funds to a project, all the way to getting the project even past advertisement and to the point that it's actually spending money.
Does that clarify?
No, I actually understood that, but I understood the federal money side of it that Eric was explaining, but when you use the term budgeted, that means something completely different for a local government.
Okay.
So I want to make sure that you're talking about, because what happens, and I'm going to pick on TAP here for a little bit, so I know you're going to hit STB Metro or STPG monies here in a moment, but if let's say we could get a project to award construction dollars, let's say it's in 24, we have to come up with other monies to do all those pre-construction activities, for example, and that all has to be done before you get to the obligation piece. So for us, we're showing that as budgeted or included in our, let's say, 5-year plan. But you're actually not counting the day the obligation happens until we're ready to go to construction. And that gets to be a little bit of a chicken and egg situation for a local government. So one, I wanted to make sure that we were using the right terms. Two, that there was kind of an understanding maybe on your part, some of the things that we have to do local governments to get to that obligated point. And two, I don't know that everyone understands some of the terminology that is associated with these federal fundings when we get award, that I just want to make sure that we're careful that we're talking about it correctly.
Yeah, I appreciate that context. And this is not necessarily part of the presentation, but I think to that point, when we allocate dollars to a MPO and then the MPO gets to select those projects and put them in their tip, it's advantageous to be kind of forward looking and looking at if I'm allocating FY23 dollars to a project that might not have local revenues being budgeted and, you know, put aside to be able to use as match, or there's a lot of either pre-construction or right-of-way acquisitions that must occur prior to that project being advertised and executed from a construction side, it's maybe not advisable to allocate FY23 dollars if you can't get all that stuff done till FY25. And I think that's what ends up putting us in sort of this lag situation, is FHWA is considering those dollars as FY23 dollars and setting the lapse timer 4 years after FY23. Which, if, you know, through that kind of example that I laid out, if the project's not actually executable at the best case scenario till FY25, that only gives us 2 years to execute the project. Probably, I know I'm speaking to the choir there, but just wanted to lay that out.
Yeah, so I back on this graph, I think the take home message here is that consistently in the TAP program, more funds get rolled forward each year. And they're outpacing your allocation. So the balance is building, building, building. But we did notice in 2022, there was a significant decrease in that roll forward amount. And I think either some large projects or quite a few projects were pushed through the system. So that amount decreased. And here's a different view, more isolated, of just the 2021 to 2022 balance. In 2021, that roll forward balance was 728%, and there were no obligations in 2021 of TAP funds. But in 2022, there were 156,000, and the roll forward balance was considerably less than the previous year. Ideally, you want your obligation amount, the orange line here, to at least equal your allocation, because then you'll be breaking even, or the allocation, yeah, you'll be breaking even in that point. So you won't have to, you won't be increasing this balance. And but if you want to start addressing that roll forward balance, then the obligation will have to be over the blue box allocation, and it'll start drawing down those roll forward balances every year. This is a list of projects that we are seeing on our side and our system, of open projects and also projects that are listed in the STIP right now. This first list up here is the open projects, and the list down here in the second box is what is just in the STIP as of right now. And if you even moved forward just a few of these larger projects, that would drastically help with your obligation and your roll forward balances. So the Pikes Peak Greenway Trail, and then the MMT Route 1 and 7, and the 30th Street improvements.
So can I ask you a question? Those are all 3 my projects.
Okay.
Two of them are under construction. Therefore, all
Okay.
those funds should be obligated. And the third one is going out for bid imminently, like hopefully
Okay.
even today. So why are
great.
you?
Okay.
So I guess the question is, if it's already obligated, why is it showing up on your list?
Yep, so those projects are not technically obligated, or at least not fully obligated. They're under what we call advanced construction. So again, that's that procedure that the feds allow us to begin more projects than you actually have obligation limitation or apportionments for. And then as projects begin to spend money, in order for them to be reimbursed, it is then that we have to commit that obligation authority to that specific project. So we try to reserve that obligation authority, because if we obligated projects unnecessary, like before they actually spent money, then that's less dollars available to obligate on projects that maybe are spending money. And you have to have both obligation and eligible expenditures in order to get reimbursed by the feds. So we're trying to line up those obligations with project expenditures. We could hypothetically, if we had to, obligate these projects, but without eligible expenditures or activity coming into the projects to bill FHWA, they might hit what we call the inactive list. So we're trying to balance that whole cash flow situation as well as preventing projects from becoming federally inactive. So that's why these projects don't show up as obligated. We do recognize, as we have there, that they are open, they started, and hopefully they'll be spending money.
And then, so these projects, sounds like they're in construction phase, so that's good. They're moving through the system. That'll really help with this balance. And then these down here, if those can move forward into getting into what we kind of talked about earlier, what our version of budgeted is, and get ready to advertise those for construction, that would also further help your balance, address that balance. And if you need any assistance on our end, we're more than willing to work with the region and contracts or whatever you would need in order to move these projects forward to advertise as well. And on the STIP side, that's the Rock Island Trail and the Sand Creek Trail. I'll hand it back off to you, Eric.
Okay, thank you. So to summarize the TAP program, again, we had that, up to 3.7 million lapsing over those 2 years out in the future. We did have that current pipeline of projects that was already budgeted, about 2.3 million in that advanced construction status, plus another 2 million in planned that are actually in the STIP. And if we execute all of that, that's 4.6 million. So what we want to do is ensure that we hit at least 80% of that 4.6 million that's sort of in the pipeline. And if we do at least 80% by September 2025, then we're in good standing and we won't have any lapse.
Before we move on to STPG Urban, are there any other questions or points of clarification?
No, it
Carrie.
doesn't look like there's any other questions, but I will say we did take a lot of time on the GHG thing. So maybe just sort of hit the general couple first slides page, but I don't think you need to go in the same sort of detail. But
Very good.
I'm just reading the room. That's all I'm saying.
Yes. Okay. Eric, I'll let you highlight this one.
Yeah, we'll go through and same kind of story situation, concept as the TAP, but the STBG Urban is obviously a much bigger program. So there's a bit more at risk, I'll say that, here for lapse. Go ahead and go to the next one page.
Well, Eric, I can jump in since I don't think any of these projects are mine because my dollar amounts are too small. But just for my own knowledge, isn't Charter Oak Ranch Road under construction? Like, I'm trying to figure out what I should be panicking about and what I shouldn't be panicking about. But I feel like 30th Street is going, research is going, Charter Oak is going. So just, I want to help. I want to understand if we have a real problem or if we just have math that hasn't caught up with the real world.
I think that, yes, these are going in, and the slide deck that we just bypassed, there was a really, really dramatic decrease in the roll forwards of this program. So we had like some really big projects get budgeted, which was great and it's going to help us. But this, I'll just say that this story is not a new story. We, Pikes Peak, as well as other MPOs, have been carrying forward really, really large balances in these programs for as long as I've worked at CDOT, which is a really long time. So it's not necessarily like, hey, there's not a problem here. These projects are happening. there is sort of a long-standing issue of, it takes so long to get IGAs out, or like I mentioned, the planning processes of earmarking FY23 funds for projects that actually won't execute until FY25. That kind of planning process in itself may be, something worthwhile to look into. So anyway, I'm not trying to say like we're not going to make or clear the hurdle of lapse, but I would say like any pressure that we can put to actually do better than just barely clearing the hurdle of lapse and get out ahead of these programs will be a great benefit to everybody.
So is that a good graph that we're looking at? Is that a graph you want to see? You like that 2022 look?
I want to see, yeah.
You want us to model?
This is gorgeous.
Okay,
yeah, I
that's
mean,
what I want to make sure.
2020 looked really.
It was good. It wasn't panic. So this is good. This is what you want to see.
Yeah,
so
this is
we
good.
can all take a deep breath.
And keep those obligations. Anyway.
Eric? Hey, quick question for you, because you said that it won't show up as money being spent until we submit our first reimbursement request. Is that right? On a construction project?
Right. And we incrementally obligate projects based on your incremental invoicing of the project.
So the point is though, I mean, depending upon how quickly the invoice gets in from the contractor, how quickly the owner reviews it, how quickly that gets turned around. I mean, it could be 3 or 4, I hate to say 5 months after construction's already started before CDOT even obligates the funds, because that would be the first time they'd see the reimbursement request. So basically these numbers are all in arrears, or all lagged by X amount of time, and they will be. And then all of a sudden at the end, it'll all catch up in theory. Okay, fascinating.
So yeah, I think kind of summarizing what Eric said, you guys, there's been a historic larger balance, but you knocked it out of the park in 2022. Your roll forward balance decreased so much that it actually is catching up, or you are catching up to what that roll forward balance was, and it was less than your allocations, which is great. That's exactly what we want to see. And then I think you touched on, okay, these projects, Charter Oak and 30th, and the research project, they are moving forward. It sounds like what you said, Brian, they're in arrears, and it sounds like we are going to be getting some invoices through for those. And then these are the ones that I think are still in our STIP. I don't know where they are with you guys, but if those could similarly move forward, the Woodmore one and the Jackson Parkway, the South Academy is the CDOT one, but that will also continue to help. Eric, if you want to hit the last summary.
So this one, we are in better shape than TAP, even though it's a bigger pot of money, a little bit more money at risk. The coverage, I should say, the amount of projects that we have in this pipeline, we would only have to obligate 50% of these projects in order to clear that hurdle. So not as drastic as TAP.
So summary of the story is TAP, little more attention. SCPG, you guys really knocked it out of the park. So great work on that. And that's our presentation. Any last questions?
So Paige, Eric, not so much a question, but hopefully I'm lobbing a softball here. I think you guys sat in on a project a review meeting earlier this week. And during that meeting, I think, Eric, it was you who made the comment, again, this is a problem statewide with different MPOs. So you as CDOT are trying to spend the oldest money first on a statewide basis. So even as we sort of move forward with things, there are other MPOs maybe who are not making the same sort of progress, or there is additional funds. And I think the bottom line, Eric, you made the offer, if you have a project that can move faster and spend money faster, but you're just waiting on this sort of waiting on the math to catch up with real life. Man, I'm going to make that into a bumper sticker, right? You had made the offer that if people contact you guys at finance there, you may be able to advance the project and just get it done faster. So could you reiterate that? Because I think there are folks
and-
here that would like to move faster and spend money faster. And if you've got the ability to do that, I think they'd be interested in hearing it.
Yeah, so we had a particular project, I think it was City of Fountain, where in their tip, the funding was allocated, say, $100,000 every year for the next 5 years. I'm gonna use a hypothetical project, I guess. And so technically in their tip, they won't have the full budget for their project until 5 years from now. And what I was saying is, well, you know, based on our available funding, when I look at it, I have $500,000 available on the federal books right now. In theory, we shouldn't have to wait for that 5th year when, you know, the planning dollars all accrued to 500,000 on the, what was it, 2027. And I was saying, well, there's no reason to wait for 2027 to start your project if you are actually able to start it today. So that's sort of the what I would say is, you know, if you're able to execute a project, let's look at how that plan of the funding is structured. And if we're able to utilize current available resources to get that project going, we should do that. And then we'll shift whatever projects are not ready to go. We'll shift those planning resources out into a future year that more aligns with when that project's ready to go. So I hope that made sense.
No, it did. If, like I said, if anyone's got a project out there that's waiting on money, he's got money waiting on a project. So just like I said, reach out to Paige and Eric and we'll do whatever we need to make it happen. So any other questions from anybody? Otherwise, we turn it back.
And that would only be for existing projects in the TAP. It would not be any new TAP projects.
Well, I think it's both TAP and STP, correct, Eric? I mean, they've got capacity in both.
Yeah,
But yeah, it would be an
correct. And-
existing project. You can't bring a brand new project that hasn't already had funding program to it. But if you've got something that's programmed 2 or 3 years from now, but the project's ready to go now, I think he's saying that CDOT's got the capacity, again, looking beyond
advance
just
funding.
PPACG, looking statewide, they've got the capacity to advance those, and they would sure like to do that. It's a win-win. You get the project sooner, and CDOT reduces the risk of lapsing funds. So if you've got that, this is our open invitation to pick up the phone and give Paige and Eric a call and advance that project. And if they can, they just let us know, and then we do whatever we need to do on our bookkeeping end with the tip, and we can make that happen.
Thank you, Eric, Paige. Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Let me survey the room real quick. We've been at it for 2 hours. Do we need to take a quick 10-minute break before Jason continues the presentations?
So that would be awesome. Maybe just 5 minutes even.
Okay, 5-minute break.
Can I just ask a quick question? Even though
4-minute
I
break.
probably whispered poorly. Kathleen, did you have anything else to add from CDOT since you normally talk under 7A?
No, not right now. I'm just here listening in. I think most of the important stuff has been covered from the CDOT end of things for today. But thanks for thinking of me.
Okay, 5 minutes. Thanks. Next on the agenda is Jason with PPACG. All right, Jason, it's all yours.
Okay, thanks. I'm doing a true hybrid style. I'm at the podium, but I'm also going to be on Zoom, sharing my screen. That's right, multitasking. If I can do it. Sharing my screen.
Oh, he's not present.
Okay, we see the screen? Tri-county study? Okay,
You can't hear people online.
okay. I know we're a little worn out at this point, so I'll try not to belabor any of this. But there is, I do want to start with a little bit of background because it's been a few months since we talked about the Tri-County study. A lot of work's been going on, but it's been sort of a drawn out project due to some delays at the state level. First conversations about it happened in 2018, 2019, when the Ppacg board noticed that there'd never been really a concerted effort to help our rural member jurisdictions outside the MPO with any transportation plans or studies, unlike what we've got inside the urbanized area with the long range plan and the TIP every few years. Then fast forward to about 2 years later, May of 2021, work officially started. We retained the services of Felsberg Holt Ulebid consultant to help lead the study. We did a check-in with the TAC back in 2019, some scoping questions. We checked in again with the TAC in October 2021 to make sure we're on the right path. And so it's been about 8 months. A lot of work has been done. Just a small amount more background. So the Tri-County study is the first transportation study that Ppacg has done in the whole COG area. And the graphic is here on the right, just so you can see the nested geographies that we work in. So there's the MPO area that gets a plan and a TIP every few years in a regular cycle. And the largest outline you can see is the TPR. That's the CDOT Transportation Planning Region, 5 counties, and they get a plan every few years. But the green shaded area is the Council of Governments, and they've never gotten a plan or a study. And significantly, when CDOT does their plan, they're really just looking at the on-state facilities. So there's a whole layer of regionally significant connectors that really haven't gotten a look outside the MPO area. So that's what the Tri-County study is primarily meant to remedy. It's funded with MMOF and TAP funds from the Region 2 buckets, not the Ppacg funding buckets. We started pretty high level because, like I said, there's no previous efforts to build on that covered this particular network. And we really wanted to drive forward with stakeholder input and not so much data, just because it's the first time out. We wanted to go and talk to the people in the counties and the communities out there and find out what their priorities and needs are. And then we're hoping to wrap up this summer. And so we'll be coming back to this group probably in June again to get a recommendation for approval, hopefully. Goals and deliverables, to tell you what the Tri-County is really all about. So it's probably more similar to the long range transportation plan than the TIP. It's not going to directly program any funding to projects. One of the main benefits is that it'll provide a project list. In this case, it'll be about 88 projects and initiatives to show regional acknowledgement and support of projects that our member governments want to do that are outside the MPO area. So we always get a trickle of projects and 1s or 2s requests for inclusion of a project by some member government in a regionally approved document, just to make it a little bit easier on them when they go for grant funding. So we thought, let's be proactive and go out and get these projects from everybody and get them in a regional document. So that when grant funding time comes, they can just copy, paste, and show regional support. In phase 2, which we're about to start next, we're going to add detail to some of the projects and initiatives. So I'll get more into that later, a few slides down the road, and we'll provide a funding plan that provides it'll pair some of these projects with appropriate funding sources. Probably not for each project, but by category. Regional perspective. As far as we know, nobody's ever really taken a look at this before. So I know the map on this one is too small to see in detail. It's really just there to give you a flavor of what we've done, what we've looked at. And I know everybody's going to get real excited when you hear you're the first audience ever to see this particular network. It's never really existed before. So
Can you send us the map, Jason?
yeah, I can send it separately. It's also in the attachment in the packet. So it's there and it's larger. It's
So I can blow it up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the regional network, and then so regional perspective and lay groundwork for possible future plans. So as I said, we really wanted to be stakeholder driven, and I would say about 70–80% of the stakeholder process has been completed. There've been a lot of meetings and interviews, probably several dozen altogether. But some of the things we heard early on we really took our guidance and our steering from those. So some of the common themes we heard early on is so our Ppacg groups, the county stakeholder groups that we convened for the project, they affirmed our approach of looking primarily outside the MPO area. Again, because the member governments outside the MPO don't get any regular planning or transportation studies the way that the MPO members do. So they affirmed that, and they affirmed our approach of looking at the facilities that are off of the state system. Because again, they don't get any planning regularly. Everybody brought up growth happening across Southern Colorado. Recreation tourist traffic is expected to greatly increase. They asked us to look at new state and federal funding options. And one thing that surprised us that came up at nearly every meeting and conversation we had across the entire region was communications, cell phone coverage, and broadband. So that was another thing we're looking at. And there's a pretty good nexus there between that and transportation. Project approach, briefly. So the scope was developed cooperatively with stakeholders from all three counties. And an important distinction is that it's a study, not a plan. And the main distinction for us there is that we're not going to assign funding to particular projects. There's not going to be a project prioritization process with winners or losers. We've got about 88 projects. We're trying to include everything we can that doesn't seem like it would be categorically disagreeable to our board and committees. So phase one will, which is what we're wrapping up now. There was a very hefty review of existing plans across the region to give us that perspective and avoid duplication with things that are already being done. Stakeholder process, the bulk of it, there's still some to do, and creating the project list. And then next we'll be drilling down in some of the projects and developing that funding plan. This slide about the stakeholder process is really, I would say, a summary representation of a lot more work that just wasn't going to fit on the slide. But we had a core stakeholder group, which was just one or two people in each county that we think are most familiar with everything that's going on. You know, they're public works directors, county administrators, county commissioners that we could check in with and get our fundamental direction from them. We also had county stakeholder groups, which were just kind of wider, more diverse attendance, one for each county. So we're not only talking to a couple of people. Like I said, we've talked to the TAC and the CAC before. We also broke out into several focus groups, transit, emergency planning, trails, roadway, and technology and communications, because they were recurring themes that came up. So those groups were topical instead of geographic. So it could be an emergency planning group with people who have that role from across the three-county region. And we're going to do a little public release, not much of a big deal. We didn't go strong on public release, public participation more widely, because we just have such a robust stakeholder process with pretty good diverse representation on that. And it is a study, not a plan. So it's not really going to advance any of these projects with funding per se. I know there's a lot of text here, so I'm just going to kind of skim through it pretty quick. One of the interesting things to learn in our review of existing plans and looking at existing conditions was just some common themes from across the whole region, which we didn't really know about. We didn't know what the common themes would be that everybody wants to do. So from county master plans, managing growth expectations, maintaining rural character and recreation tourism opportunities, and then from municipal plans, transportation related elements, collaboration between jurisdictions. Everybody wanted to improve walking and biking conditions. There was pretty universal support for expanding transit options, maintenance and scenic byways, and tourism oriented infrastructure. And these were fairly universal across the three-county region. And we didn't really know what we would find there. We also looked at emergency plans because that came up a few times in the original scoping. There were several people that pointed out that we're not really as prepared as we could be for an emergency, like maybe a big wildfire. So in the plans that we looked at, the existing plans, there was not really much focus on transportation infrastructure. And I'll just skip to the red bullet here and leave the rest for later. The specific needs and challenges are not really documented in any of the emergency plans that we looked at, really. So that's a big gap. And we're going to continue to meet on that a little bit and see if there's a lot to do. So we're not going to be able to get to resolution or create a plan, but hopefully just take the next one step forward and get it just a tiny bit more coordinated than it is, and try to outline what the next steps would be. So these are some of the focus group findings. There was a transit focus group. We got a whole lot of input on transit. One interesting aspect is that the character of the transit rider inside and outside of the urbanized area, they're very different types of people with different needs. But I'm just going to briefly skim through these. Everybody said it was tough to make longer trips just because of a lack of coordination across services. Transit dependent people can't get to medical appointments or vital services. Paratransit is a little bit of a mess in terms of consistency, coordination, and a lot of confusion. There's exceptions to that. I mean, there's a lot of people doing a good job, but when you scale up and look at the region as a whole, then it gets pretty messy. There's a lot of interest in improved first and last mile connections, and everybody pretty much agreed that there should be an east-west spine of transit across the region of some kind, and the thought is it would probably be a Mustang or Outrider route, something like that. But there was a lot of agreement about that. Trails, there were just a couple of big points that came out of those groups. Kind of the usual suspects again. We didn't get it in any one of these. We didn't really get, there's not enough infrastructure. There's not enough there to work with. It pretty universally was that there's not enough coordination. There's not enough consistency, and things they're confusing out there. And same for trails. And another endemic problem for trails is that they're bisected by state and county roads that just don't have good crossings. So the previous slide about emergency was existing studies that we reviewed, and this is what came out of our stakeholder process. And again, I'm just going to kind of skim because there's a lot of bullets here. There's a lack of coordination in evacuation routes. So situations have developed that we've been told about where, you know, one government is dumping people onto a detour route that's also the only way in and out for another community. So then they're not really able to get out in an emergency situation. So there's a pretty serious lack of coordination. That's pretty pronounced on US 285. And there's things that would seem little in normal times, like clearing vegetation around cell phone towers and evacuation routes, that can really become a deadly situation if it isn't handled right in an emergency situation. Limited cell phone coverage. Again, same thing in normal times, just a nuisance. In an emergency could be a deadly situation. A lot of folks said we should do more integration of emergency planning into transportation planning. Roadway closures and detour routes are not they're not well coordinated. And then it does look like there's plenty of grants available, but there's a general lack of staff to pursue them. And we're just about done here. So I know everybody's a little worn out. This is where we are between phase 1 and phase 2. We've got our list of 88 projects. I didn't anticipate really anybody wanting to go through them, although we can. What we did was choose about 12 projects from the master list, not for funding. That's normally what we're talking about when we talk about project selection. These were selected just for a drill down, so that our consultants can have their planners and engineers take a look at a subset of projects and just go into more detail, flesh out the project concept, provide a cost estimate, especially when there's a member jurisdiction that doesn't really have the capacity to do that right now for the type of project that we're looking at. And so, and some of this is detailed in the attachment in the draft document that was provided. So there's a sort of a table of these with a justification column, like why was this chosen? And then we also worked pretty closely with our core stakeholders to check in and say, does this look right to you? But initially they were chosen for, there's enough complexity so that the project would really benefit from some more drill down and development like this. So it's not, we're not going to do it for a repaving project, which might be very important, but it's relatively simple and straightforward. It should be supported. And then, of course, it doesn't have that level of development already. So that was how those projects were chosen. And that's it. That's a year of work in a few minutes. And welcome any questions or comments now or in the future. There's still time to make comments on any of this. very happy to hear from you. But that's all from me.
Go ahead, Tim.
So you said you're gonna, I'm not even on that. I'm not officially on the TAC today, but from the audience, you said there's 12 projects that you guys are gonna advance. So like, to what level are you advancing, and can you give us a little more idea what led to their selection?
Yeah. Actually, maybe I can show you. I might have to share a different, okay, there we go. So this is just a glance. I had these pulled up in case you want to know about this, because it's a very good question. This is just a shot of, hopefully it's not, can you see, am I sharing the right screen? I'm probably not, right? Okay. Share a different screen. There we go. So this is just a quick look, and this is in the draft document that's in the attachment also. So if you want to look at it at your leisure, that's fine. So out of the list of 88 projects, what we're really looking for is something that's a complex idea, that's a need's been identified, it's fairly complicated, like maybe a corridor subplan or something like that, where there's maybe an emergency need or a transit issue that could really benefit from a little bit more of a sophisticated look by some engineers and planners at the consulting firm. So they would be looking at this. The goal would be to get it in shape for a potential funding application, or if it's not an infrastructure project, to lay down what the needs are, give some definition to the needs if it's a study or a plan that's needed. But the end goal would be very variable, because it could be a road project, it could be a transit project, it could be just laying the groundwork for a plan that's needed. So there's not really one answer to that part, but maybe I can give you a glance at some of the other tables.
Just to chime in, the first transit one there, I recall when we used to receive CMAQ, Mountain Metro had that car or van pool from Woodland Park to downtown Colorado Springs.
So, and again, forgive me for jumping in, Jason, but because we're a little off topic. But remember, we're going to be getting the new I forget the name of it, the new congestion funding, right? So in the IIJA, there's this congestion funding that we will get. I think I asked Jessica to send out an email today. And so it's going to be about $1 million a year. That sort of thing is going to be eligible for these funds. STP dollars, back to the whole GHG discussion. Those sorts of van pools would also be eligible for STP dollars. So see, we don't necessarily have to, if it was CMAQ in the past, we can find substitute funding solutions if that's something that the region really wants to move forward on.
Yeah, good comment. Thank you. And so this is a snapshot of some of the logic. If you look at the column on the far right, the project on top wasn't a good candidate because of it, more of an internal county responsibility. It's not really regionally significant, or an improvement plan's already in place. So maybe it was something that somebody mentioned to us as important and they wanted to see it included, but there's already a plan in place. Or CDOT was the project lead. Somebody wanted to make sure that it was known that they encourage this project, they support it, but it looks like CDOT will probably take the lead. But there's sort of an informal logic to it. There's not really a matrix or a scoring system or anything like that, just because the input and the interest that we got they're so variable. So we looked at scoring systems and things like that, and there were just project types and ideas that just wouldn't work for so there could be a road project next to a corridor study, next to a transit coordination idea, next to, so it just got tough to do. So the approach that we took was to just kind of look at it from a common sense perspective, and then call people up and meet with them and check with them and say, does this make sense to you? Is this important to your county or your city? Do you need help with this, or do you feel like you've got it? So conversations like that. Does that answer your question or? Okay. Okay, if it's a good question, yeah, because it's not readily apparent, so I get it.
So I just want to say thank you. This is fantastic. I think.
Oh, thank you.
We've been waiting for this for a while in this area, and it really kind of brings Park County into the fold. I know it's hard for them because they feel like they're way out there and they drive all the way down here. And I think COVID helps for the fact that they can be more involved, and even their citizens can be more involved now that we're streaming these meetings. So I think that's really exciting. And then you and I can talk offline about the map so I can get an idea of kind of what snapshot in time you guys picked to put that together, just in case we may want to add Powers Boulevard South. So we can talk about that offline.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, yeah, I appreciate the comment. And we've learned a lot because a lot of our rural member jurisdictions, we didn't have much of a technical level everyday connection with their staff and their planners. So we've met a lot of people and they know a little more about us. We know a lot more about their concerns. And so that's been an interesting thing. All right, thanks.
Danelle, are you ready?
Was it something I said?
Okay, the next item on our agenda is just our standard monthly IIJA updates for informational purposes. There was a new NOFO that came out for multimodal project discretionary grants. It's been out for a couple of weeks, so everybody's probably familiar with it, but we just wanted to put the information out there just in case anyone needed that information, because it is significant and combines three pretty big opportunities. I can scroll down a little bit on my own screen. US DOT brought out in or came up with a planning table projections of NOFOs that will come out over the next few months. We thought that that was some information that could be useful to everybody. So we wanted to include that here, and all of the links to all of the information that's out there right now. We'll, keep that updated. It's also on our Ppacg IIJA site. And then finally, there was a Rural Opportunities to Use Transportation for Economic Success initiative development that came out just 2 weeks ago, I think. They created a rural electric vehicle infrastructure toolkit that's designed to try to help rural communities get funding for EV charging infrastructure. So we've also included the links for that. And again, we'll try to keep our IIJA website updated, and we'll bring you anything new that we find next month. And that's it for the IIJA update.
Danelle, would you scroll up just a bit there?
Mm-hmm.
Keep going, first page, like right. So right there, it shows that May 23rd. I'm just curious for all the other agencies, how many are preparing to, I'm assuming, Brandy, are you going to submit? Do you know for those? Because that's a month away, and I mean, I don't feel prepared for that.
And these are monumental efforts. I mean, they're required. Yeah, these grants, as you're aware, are monumental efforts if you've done like arrays or infra. And reason why we're able to turn around in this short time frame is it's a springboard off the Chrissy grant we put together this past fall. And we are looking for 3 rail bridges and 1 roadway bridge to be replaced and realigned as part of our grant effort. But we're leveraging RTA funds to go and get the additional help. We can have no internal staff bandwidth to do it.
Victoria, what do you guys think?
All right, I have to admit, I can't see what grant you're talking about.
It's the mega infra one that's out.
Yeah, we
Well,
are not applying for, we're not applying for that one. We just don't have anything in the pipeline that's that big and that ready.
Interesting.
So
The
Gail,
town
does
of
that mean-
Monument it will be submitting for Jackson Creek Parkway.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. Okay, I was just curious. Okay. Thank you.
Very
Thanks,
helpful,
Danelle.
Danelle, though. We really appreciate it.
Good, good. I'm glad it's helpful.
Okay. Looks like Danelle, you get to go again.
I do, and I do not have a fancy slideshow like Jason did, but this is a much smaller effort. So Ppacg has internally developed a draft transportation electrification plan. Basically, we went out and gathered a lot of data, gathered a lot of existing plans, a lot of existing data and other efforts that have been completed by other folks, and tried to bring those together to assess the existing infrastructure and kind of put together some information that hopefully could help any of our jurisdictions, help support them if they were interested in pursuing any grant funding for EV infrastructure. So we've completed a draft. Like I said, it was primarily a desktop effort, but we felt like this was the point where we needed to bring it to TAC and start including stakeholders. So we have included it in your packet. We're not going to go through it today, but what we would like to do is, give you guys some time to look it over, give us suggestions, corrections, let us know if there's anything missing, if there's anything that's you feel is problematic for your jurisdiction, anything else you'd like to see. And then we'll set up a workshop meeting in progress review, whatever you want to call it. And then depending on the level of interest and what kind of feedback we get, perhaps have some additional stakeholder meetings or one-on-one interviews, whatever else we need to kind of make sure that everybody is on board with this product. So we just wanted to bring it to you today for information.
Daniel, do you see this going through a formal adoption process, going through the TAC with some recommendation to the board and then the board adopting it?
I believe we do, yes.
Yeah, and the process would be not right now, because again, this is sort of the release of it. So you guys can take a look at it, give us your comments back. But yeah, after the stakeholders and all of your other comments, eventually this would go to back here to the TAC, the CAC, and then the board. And then the board, we actually had a discussion about that. Ultimately, it's cleaner if they feel comfortable adopting it, because again, this is not necessarily for Colorado Springs because you guys just adopted your own EV plan, right? But for a lot of the other jurisdictions, you guys didn't? Oh, that's right. It just went for information this time. But you guys are working on your own EV plan. But for the other jurisdictions, this is intended if they want to do EV charging stations, if this is a document that would help them in that application process at both the state and the federal level. And that's the intent of it. So it would be cleaner for, let's say Manitou Springs wants to put in an application. They can say this project is consistent with a regionally adopted EV plan. So that elevates that application within that process at both the state and the federal level. So that's the intent of this, is again, help those who want to go down that EV road, see what I did there? Actually be more successful in the application process. And so it would be nice if the board is comfortable adopting it. But if not, if they just accept it, that would work as well. So again, we'll have to see where people are at on the wordsmithing.
No, thank you. I appreciate that clarification. And if you listen to the work session, City Council, because that was last week, you'll know that there's a lot of consternation with the direction right now.
So two things, much like consistencies, I'm assuming or hoping that this is consistent with Colorado Springs and vice versa. Or
Yes, yeah. And we've got a copy of Colorado Springs draft plan and we've considered that in the development of this.
so they're not in conflict.
No.
And then who put this one together?
Internal staff.
It looks gorgeous. So kudos to you guys. It looks really good. And
It was Casey and Danelle. I'm
yeah.
like a proud supervisor. I actually have it like magneted up on my refrigerator.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean, that looks like something I'm excited to read. So good job.
So to clarify, because Manitou has applied for a Charge Ahead Colorado grant, we did receive it. Unfortunately, CSU told us they're 60 weeks out for new transformers. So that was a disappointing blow. Is your vision that you'll just kind of help be a resource, you know, because it's not really any PPACG money. So it's really just like, hey, this is available. Like, where do I go first? I'm going to call Danelle. She'll help lead you the way. Okay.
Yep.
yeah, we're a resource. And again, nothing in this promotes or recommends that a jurisdiction puts in EV charging stations. So we're very neutral in that respect because we, you know, in the spectrum of where people sit on the issue, we were very careful not to upset anybody. So if you're choosing to go down that road, this is something that would assist you in doing it. Because again, it's a plan that sort of lays everything out. The other thing is it's not an implementation document. That's where we're a little different again from Colorado Springs in that we're not electrifying any of our assets. We're not specifically saying where things would go. We're just merely saying that these are the gaps and things that fall within this gaps. You know, if someone wants to apply for funding, they could point to this document and say, look, we're filling a gap that exists in the region. And there's another lot of good information that's in there. So that again is the intent. So we're very trying to walk that fine line of not trying to promote something, but at the same time, for other folks that want to do this, really give them a leg up in doing it. And is there something in the chat that we're supposed to read, or is that a different subject?
Yeah, that's.
No, that's a different subject. Transplant, sorry.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I was just,
Did I get that right?
I feel like there's a lot of information here that we probably should have a chance to.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
A lot of information.
Yeah, we're prepared to go through it section by section, right? No, it's getting a little late. You guys take a look at it and let us know.
No, yes. And like I said, I'll set up send out an email and anybody that's interested, just let us know and we'll set up a workshop time or an in progress review time. So.
Danelle, Danelle, this is Brian with Colorado Springs. I just wanted to let you know, you're probably already aware, but Samantha Bailey, one of your former colleagues, she works for our Office of Innovation, and she's kind of in the middle of a citywide sustainability plan. And I believe there could be some interesting work that maybe could inform this. I don't know if you've had any conversations, but it might be something good to look up with Samantha on. And also probably too late to include in this effort, but later this year we plan on starting a zero emission vehicle transition plan.
Yes.
We received a grant from the state several months ago to do that. What's that look like for us? How do we transition our fleet to zero emission? Do we stay with battery electric buses or some other type of technology? So we'll be starting that sometime later this year, just like we're also trying to start our 2050 transit plan later this year. So that's very exciting. We're looking forward to doing that, and applaud you guys for doing this on your end. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And we did mention we did mention transit fairly briefly, but we did mention that you guys are doing your own zero emission vehicle plan. So that's at least in there.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dana.
Thank you.
All right, let's, are there any announcements from our members that they would like to share?
Yes, this is Debbie with the Town of Monument.
Yes, Debbie.
You all probably know this already, but Megan Harrington has stepped down and she's working as part-time for the Town of Monument. But our new planning director will be Nina Ruiz, who will be starting June 1st.
Great. Thank you.
And the Town of Monument stole her from us.
Yeah, I was afraid to go to the next HBA meeting.
It's a big gain for you, a big loss for us.
Yeah, I wish you best of luck, Victoria. I feel so bad for you right now. Losing two directors, so director and a planning manager, so
I also
hopefully.
want to say that Monument also stole Megan from the city of Colorado Springs. So.
Yep, that's why I was afraid to go to the next HBA meeting. They always argue about it.
I just want to point out, no one ever tries to steal me. I don't get it.
Dole, this is Brian. I just wanted to let everybody know that we'll be implementing our spring service changes this Sunday. So that's restructuring Route 23, which is along the Barnes and Tut corridors. And 2 of our battery electric buses will be operating on the new restructured Route 23.
Hey, Brian, besides the fact they're quiet, are the buses labeled? And is there a way to know it's an EV bus besides the fact it's quiet and there's no, exhaust?
Yeah, they all have unique wraps on them, with a kind of historic photos of Nikola Tesla and some, historic photos of Colorado Springs. So you'll be able to pick them out. They look quite different than our regular fleet.
Okay.
Plus they're really big.
Okay.
Well, Brian, I think though, the question I always hear when we hear about EVs is there any other noises beside that the bus is going to be emitting? So people know that they're coming.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, they have a nice hum to them, and they still have air brakes that can scare you if you're not prepared. So
Can you add ice cream truck music? Because people really pay attention to that.
yeah, we'll look into that, Tim.
We'll all run after it. Manitou has a new planning director starting on Monday that speaking of stealing, that we apparently stole from City of Colorado Springs. So we're excited to have Hannah.
And we're
join
not
our
very
team.
happy about it.
We're excited to have Hannah join our small little town. So I imagine she may have some Ppacg involvement in the future. So
I would also like to know, the City of Colorado Springs is pursuing that large mega/infra grant application that we're going to be putting together, and we will be reaching out to the board to ask for a letter of support to go along with our application.
And sorry, Dole, one more thing, adding on to what Gail just said. We'll also be submitting a LONO grant application at the end of May for at least 6 battery electric buses that will hopefully replace our 6 diesel buses that will be operating on the downtown shuttle starting later in May. So, and again, John and Danelle will probably ask you for a letter of support for that as well.
all right, any other announcements? Any other items for future tech meetings?
So one quick thing that I want to mention is we're trying to schedule a tour of CDOT projects. And it would be June 9th, which is a Thursday. And basically this came from a few years back. We did a tour where CDOT got their 12-passenger van. We loaded up a bunch of elected officials and we went down I-24. That's not the way it works. It's State Route 24. We went into Woodland Park and came back. And that was very successful. But then apparently there was some sort of pandemic the last couple of years. Maybe you've heard about it. So we really haven't done anything since then. And we did get a request from one of the elected officials that took that tour and said, hey, there's some new folks. You guys should really do this again. So CDOT put together a tour of projects that we're going to do. I took this map and I forwarded it. And this is why I want to take this time to let everybody know, just so everybody doesn't think I'm being a big stinking jerk about it. But I basically, looking at the route that is already designated by CDOT, I sent it along to Colorado Springs, El Paso County, and Fountain, because they're the jurisdictions already around the route, and said, if you guys have an additional project that you'd like to add, please do so. So the reason I'm bringing this up now is to remind, actually Colorado Springs already gave me a project, which I think would be no problem to add. Remind El Paso County, if it wants to add a project, go ahead and let us know, hopefully by the end of tomorrow. And let Fountain know in person, since I apparently cannot get your email address right. They keep on getting kicked back to me. So but at the same time, want to let everybody else know that it's going on. If you hear about it and you're like, why didn't I get invited? That's my thinking. If you really have a project you'd like to get on, let me know. But obviously, we're trying to schedule it within like a 4-hour block. So I can't just, go all over the region. And that's why I try to stick to the CDOT projects. Gail, did you have a question or a comment?
It just remind me, I think for the benefit of the group, but they didn't know it already, the project we added is one that the city put in request for congressionally directed spending on behalf of the city, El Paso County, and CDOT as a joint effort. And I also thought it would be worthwhile to Brian, if you could mention your CDS request and discuss whether or not you think that might be a point on this map too.
Yeah, and Brian, I didn't send it to you because I can send it to you and we can chat through it. But again, I only have a 4-hour block. So we want to stick to things that are somewhat already on the route. So just wanted to make sure I was transparent and everybody knew what was going on. And if I could just add one more quick thing, not so much future agenda item, but it is the idea of letters of support. Obviously, we want to support a lot of projects, but we also have to be careful that the board doesn't come back and say, well, you supported this project. And while it might be a benefit for the jurisdiction that's applying, it might not necessarily have that same sort of regional support, right? So we always try to have as a rule of thumb that it's got to be consistent with the long range plan, and it has to be included in some other plan like the JLU study or something like that. If we can connect it to something that has been a board action, then I think, again, I can't speak for the executive director, but I think historically our policy's been, then we can go ahead and provide a letter of support. And that way, if somebody says, why did you support this project? Because we don't, we could say, well, actually you did because of a previous board action, it was supported. So if you do have a project you're putting in for a mega or infra or whatever, bless you, sort of project, we're happy to, if we can make a connection with a previous board action, we're happy to support it. If it's not, please don't be upset if we get a little scared, especially nowadays. As you can see, sometimes things happen at the board and you've got some folks that aren't necessarily on board with every single concept. Was that politically correct enough? I hope it was. If not, really, it was nice working with y'all. And how come nobody ever tries to poach me? That's all I want to know. Everybody else gets stolen, but nobody makes me a job offer. That's it for us.
It's because of your bad puns.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Bad?
All right. Any other announcements or anything else that needs to be on our next meeting? Okay, thank you. Let's adjourn this meeting.
Thanks, everyone.